January 10th. Everyone can join me taking themselves off of mute for the Pledge of Allegiance. I see we are streaming live. I pledge allegiance
to
to the flag of the United States of America,
America,
To the republic,
to the republic,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
and
indivisible,
with
with
liberty.
liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, I'll move right in. This is going to be a long meeting. We have a lot to go over tonight. Welcome everyone back. Hope everyone had a good, long, restful winter break before we get into the meat of the budget season. Just to let you know what we're coming into now. Tonight we will see the superintendent's presentation on the proposed budget for the Board of Education. Tonight will be a long presentation. There probably will not be a lot of questions from us as we haven't seen the budget book yet. Tomorrow we'll get the budget book. And in 2 weeks on Saturday, January 22nd, we have a full day budget workshop as a board meeting. After that, on Monday, the 24th, we will have a public hearing and meeting on the budget. And then on Tuesday, January 25th, we will have the Board of Education retreat. And just to clarify, the Board of Education retreat is a regular special board meeting. It's not something outside the norm. So it is something that we do expect all board members to attend if possible. Again, it is an agended board meeting. There have been some questions of late as to why we're still remote. And I think that we would all rather be in person at this point, but the space is just not ready. The central offices, as you know, moved into the new location last fall. We're still waiting on the electronics that are needed to do a live stream there. We could try to cobble something together, but I don't think that would really get at what people are looking for. That wouldn't make it easier for us or for the public to follow along and be part of these board meetings. So we're going to wait until the room is ready, hopefully in February, but it probably will not be in the month of January at this point. There is a CABE legislative breakfast tomorrow morning at Sandy Hook. I believe we have at least, Tina, are you attending? Tina is attending. I don't know, Dr. De Silva, are you as well?
myself and Ms. Flogel.
And Liz, great. Okay, so we will have representation there at that meeting and look forward to hearing about that at the meeting 2 weeks from now. And lastly, been a lot of work on the central admin team. We all, I hope, had a good restful break. I don't think the admin team did have that. Their nonstop work did not stop even for the vacation. And a lot of things, I'm just trying to think of what we can do to help. And the only thing I can think of is to help point people in the right direction when they have questions. Some questions are going straight to central admin or straight to social media, where they're probably best answered going first to the student's teacher and second to the building principal. So if we ask our constituents to try to work with their building principals first before moving on to the central admin, that might be a little bit of assistance. Other than that, I just say good luck, everyone. Keep on keeping on, and things will get better at some point. That's it for me. Like I said, we do have a long night, so I'm going to move right along as fast as I can. And on to Dr. De Silva.
All right, thank you. And in the spirit that it is the last day to say it, I will say Happy New Year for the last time, I promise. So despite the busy start to the new year, I'm hopeful that everyone, like Jonathan mentioned, had a nice holiday and a break, and hopefully it allowed for some respite and some time to be with family and friends, despite all of the other stuff going on. Briefly, we do have new COVID protocols. I've communicated those with families. Anyone has questions, concerns, please reach out. That's why we're here. This week, hopefully, we're going to get a podcast recorded with Dr. DeSantis, Dr. Hanaway, Aaron Crook, and perhaps myself. And I'm hopeful that that will contextualize those protocols for families and for the community, anyone who's wondering. You'll probably get to this on the student and the PTA rep side, but just a couple of quick congratulations. The RPS debate team, who devoted over 8 hours on this Saturday for the Connecticut Debate Association online tournament. Lots of time, and they came out winning some awards. They argued whether or not Times versus Sullivan should be overturned. I did a very quick Google search, and it sounds a little bit like defamation against public figures. So you can learn more about that in your free time. Sounds like our kids worked hard to debate that topic. Our winter sports teams are starting off very strong, with the exception, I think, that ski had a slow start due to lack of snow. Boys basketball undefeated at 4-0, girls basketball 6-1, wrestling team is now 7-0 in dual meets, and our boys hockey team is 4-1-1. And from what I hear, they are being recognized by most polls as one of the top teams in the state. So good for them. CERM shared that they're at an all-time book checkout. So at this time of the year, they've already checked out over 3,000 books. That seems like a lot of books. So good for them and good for our readers. It looks like that time over break, and hopefully actually February break is coming up. They'll have some more time to check out some more books. Jonathan, you already mentioned it, but tomorrow I'll be joined by Ms. Flogel and Ms. Mayorta for the CABE Area 5 legislative breakfast. I also attended the CES breakfast not that long ago. I expect to hear many of the themes that you're going to be hearing tonight in my budget presentation communicated out tomorrow, but we'll wait and see and hear what other school districts and issues they're facing. But my guess is there'll be some of the same themes that you'll be hearing from me in just a bit. Don't forget that our schools are closed on Monday, January 17th, in honor and recognition of Dr. Martin Luther King Day. And for all the kids that are out there, if you're still up tonight, wear your coats and gloves and ear muffs and leg warmers, which I hear aren't a thing anymore, but if they are, wear them, fuzzy socks, because it's going to be cold for the next few days. And I just want to remind you that schools are open on closed days. So if our school bus starts, our schools are going to start too. So no hoping for an early morning call, despite the fact that I might be checking just in case to make sure those buses start, but wear those leg warmers and come to school tomorrow. That's it for me, Jonathan.
Thank you, Dr. De Silva. I don't believe there have been any committee meetings over the break. Do we have any liaison reports? Sean?
A lot going on with the Prevention Council. We just concluded our vaping poster contest. The votes are in and the winners will be notified tomorrow, I hear. We've got winners from East Ridge, Scotts Ridge, about half a dozen kids. And next up is the Hidden in Plain Sight event, which is going to be done in coordination with the RHS PTSA. So look forward to that coming to your inbox soon.
Thank you, Sean. Other liaison reports? Okay, moving right on to representative, starting with RHS student representative. Ansh, I see you on the line.
Hey, and good evening, everyone. Happy New Year as well. I can't believe it's already 2022. Like Dr. De Silva mentioned, as repetitive as the phrase has been, hopefully the more and more we say Happy New Year, the better the year will get, and we could all use that right now. Anyways, what's going on at RHS? Before the break last month, the students and staff fully embraced the winter season by participating in a very successful Winter Spirit Week, which included themed outfit days and holiday door decorations. I know the teachers were infatuated with the doors that the student, government, and the National Honor Society teamed up to decorate. Walking around the halls, it truly felt like you were in a winter wonderland. In addition, on the half day before the break, we were surprised by the band, orchestra, and choir with a holiday concert to end school. They sounded fantastic. Fast forwarding to now, I think it's safe to say that we all needed a nice long break. I, for one, really benefited from all this extra sleep. However, midterms are creeping around the corner, but teachers have given us extra review packets for home, and we will start studying classes this week, so we'll for sure be ready. Finally, sports are in full swing, and even though students aren't able to attend games in person until the end of January, we're all showing our support through the RHS Athletics YouTube channel, which has done an amazing job broadcasting all Tiger sports games. It really isn't a surprise that the girls and boys basketball and hockey teams, boys swimming, wrestling, dance, and indoor track are all absolutely crushing it right now. That's all I have for you tonight. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Next up, NEAR representative, Liz.
Hello, everybody, and Happy New Year, I guess. I am Liz Carlin. I'm the VP of Operations with the NEAR, and I'm here to present our teacher report. I hope everybody is doing well and that people are staying safe and healthy. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. De Silva and her admin team who worked over break to prepare for a whole new set of guidelines from the CDC to deal with the fallout of the new COVID wave and for distributing rapid tests and N95 masks to our teachers from the state. Since coming back from the holiday break, we've seen a large spike in COVID cases throughout our schools and the state. We've been in communication with both the CEA and district admin and are grateful for the safety measures our district has put in place, especially when many of those same safety measures have been inconsistent in other areas across the state. Because of that inconsistency, CEA has announced that they are hosting a blackout this Wednesday, January 12th, where educators and school staff are invited to wear all black to school. The message is aimed at the governor and state leaders with a focus on bringing awareness to consistent safety measures across the districts for this new and current wave of increased COVID cases. I'm always impressed and humbled by my colleagues, and we've come so far from this time last year when we were eagerly awaiting the news of when we would get our own COVID vaccine. I want to thank all of the Ridgefield teachers for being a constant presence to our students and to each other, even when we are coming back to a new COVID wave, and many of us are scared that we are going to get sick ourselves. We're trying to stay healthy and have been working overtime to help keep the schools open and running, covering classes or providing materials for sick staff members, helping essentially wherever they can. We've been extremely fortunate that Ridgefield teachers boast an impressively high vaccination rate, but with the current high infection rate of Omicron, we are extremely concerned about staffing shortages and the long-term effects of COVID on both our students and our staff. We are all very ready for this wave to be over and all of this to be over. And finally, as we move into budget season, we are hoping for a smooth process. As we have spoken about in previous board meetings, our concerns are for the needs of our most vulnerable students and the teachers that serve those populations. We look forward to supporting a proposed budget that supports those learners and our special service providers. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have the PTA representative. Kim?
Happy New Year, everybody. I'm going to start with a really exciting announcement. Ridgebury opened their brand new inclusive and accessible playground by their kindergarten wing in December. The playground was achieved through the partnership of the Ridgebury PTA and the town of Ridgefield. The play space provides multi-sensory play experiences that allow children to develop motor skills, physical strength, and cognitive functioning. The playground includes an inclusive swing seat, inclusive slide, and a freestanding inclusive 10 spin in addition to a wheelchair ramp to the main play structure. This thing is awesome. The surface was installed by Forever Lawn CT-NY, which is owned by a Ridgebury parent, Matt Vance. The artificial grass meets ADA accessibility specifications, and it's an ideal surface for anyone with mobility issues. In addition, the artificial grass has antimicrobial protection built into the blades to help foster a cleaner, safer play surface. So congratulations to Ridgebury on that. Our PTAs have been very busy. The educational programs are moving full steam ahead with our elementary PTAs. Farmingville, Ridgebury, and VP have started their schools invention convention programs. VP began their before and after school enrichment programs, and they kicked off their PTA variety show with 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders showcasing their talents. In addition to the invention convention, Ridgebury's enrichment programs include a Connecticut Historical Society visit and a Ben Franklin visit. Barlow's monthly STEAM and Wellness challenges are continuing into the new year. Farmingville will be having their Take Apart Night on the 26th, where students get the chance to dissect old electronics, see how they work, then put them back together. They're also having their Read Cycle book swap the week of the 31st, where students can bring in books from home and exchange them for something new to read. Branchville kicked off their annual Branchville Writes competition, where students participate in fun, creative writing activities. All entries will be shared and celebrated with the BES community on their Branchville Writes Padlet. Branchville PTA is also beginning their Parent-Child Book Club, which begins this Thursday. They will be reading Front Desk by Kelly Yang. PTA co-president Angela Rice and Principal Margulies will facilitate conversations about the book with 4th and 5th graders and their parents. And on February 2nd, the Branchville PTA will sponsor their latest edition of their popular event entitled, Do We Really Need to Talk About This?, where they invite parents to come together to ask questions and have conversations with experts about how to talk to children in age-appropriate ways about differences of all kinds, including race, gender, culture, and ability. To celebrate the holidays, our PTAs hosted various events to make the season special. Before the break, Ridgebury teachers and staff were celebrated with coffee and bagels. Scotland PTA hired Bubbles and Brew truck to celebrate their teachers. They also supported in-class holiday parties, and they decorated the inside and outside of the school for winter. VP hosted a holiday luncheon for all VP staff, as well as a school-wide movie viewing before the holiday break. And Eastridge held a holiday lunch for teachers and staff. PTAs are hard at work with creative fundraising programs this year. Before the break, Scotland hosted a holiday boutique for children to purchase gifts for family and friends. Barlow officially kicked off their first ever Bobcat Readathon. The PTA has challenged the school to reach a goal of reading between 30,000 minutes and raising $15,000 between January 6th and January 18th. They've also started planning for a spring parents gala. Ridgebury had a very successful Penny Wars, with the 5th grade being crowned the winners. They were treated to a pizza party before winter break, and VP opened a spiritware store. Finally, our PTAs are hard at work giving back to the community. Before the break, Barlow PTA supported their student council with a donation drive to benefit United for the Troops, and their PTA continues to support the Dorothy Day Hospitality House with monthly sandwich making. VP ran a coin drive that raised over $800 to donate to the Ridgefield Food Pantry, and the story was picked up by the Ridgefield Press and Danbury News Time. Scotland Elementary held a Toys for Tots collection, and Eastridge has organized a gift card drive for the Logan Hale family. To date, over $7,000 has been raised to purchase gift cards from various local businesses. If you'd like to contribute, please go to the ERMS PTA website, and they'd be happy to help you support their cause. And that's all we've got. Thank you.
Thank you. As always, a lot going on with PTAs. Next up, we have approval of minutes, starting with November 8th. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of November 8th, 2021.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Ken, thank you. Any corrections or adjustments for the November 8th minutes? There being none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from November 8th, please raise your hands. That's 5-4. Do we have abstentions for anybody that was not at the meeting? Okay, the minutes are approved, 5 votes. There were some members that were not, current members that were not at that meeting. Next up, we have the November 22nd meeting minutes. Do we have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of November 22nd, 2021.
Do I have a second? Ken, again, thank you. There may be some adjustments on these. Anybody see any corrections to be made on these? Rachel?
Yep. So Jonathan, under item 2, election of officers, second paragraph, second to last sentence, it says by majority vote, Mr. Steckler. So I believe just the spelling of your last name there. And then in the last paragraph under item 2, last sentence, I believe it should read, a vote was taken by majority vote. Ms. Ruggieri was elected secretary, and it was 6-2.
Correct. Any other corrections or adjustments? All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended, please raise your hands. Any opposed? That's unanimous. The motion approved. Motion carries. Thank you all. Next up, discussion item A, Superintendent's 2022-2023 proposed operating budget.
That's me. All
That is
right.
you.
Sean Mansfield behind the screen, if you can present for me. All right. So here we go. Good evening again. Tonight, we launched the budget season with the superintendent's proposed budget for fiscal year 2023. First, I'd like to recognize the work of Dawn Norton, her very short staff, where we have a lot of shortages over here, cabinet, and the Ridgefield Public Schools leadership team for building a responsible budget that is student-centered and prioritizes the whole child. One second, I lost my, okay, here we go. The purpose for my presentation tonight is to provide a broad overview of the proposed budget. The agenda for tonight is structured as follows: the budget process, how it's designed, the landscape, the current context in which the budget was built, and the horizon, our next steps and how it may impact future budgets. While tonight you'll hear about our proposal in broad strokes, you can expect greater detail on Saturday, January 22nd. On that day, each of our cost centers will share highlights of their budget proposals and how their budgets connects to the work of the district's mission. On that day, you'll also be able to ask questions after each cost center's presentation. You'll have had your budget book and have a greater understanding of the budget. Tomorrow, you will receive those budget books. Administration, as well as other town boards, will receive them shortly thereafter. The public will be able to access a digital copy on the district's website, which will be posted in the coming days. Also, I'd like to recommend that everyone, as we make changes, the new pages will be posted to the website, the digital version. Once your budget book is received, Ms. Norton would be happy to meet with new or seasoned board members. You only see it once a year, to provide an overview, an orientation, or a refresh. The process. So briefly, here, what you see on the next 2 slides actually is a snapshot of the budget calendar and the purpose of each session. This is a glimpse into the budget process as a whole. You'll find the same budget calendar in your budget book and online. Highlighted is the full day Saturday budget workshop that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. On that day, Ms. Norton will actually provide an overview of the district's budget structure so that you can follow along in your budget book. The full day session was new last year and very well received by the public. You might remember we had a number of ongoing meetings each week prior to last year. This year, given the COVID protocols, the issues that we're having with the central office space and the supply shortage, and quite frankly, the nature and length of the presentation, it will be a virtual meeting. You might remember that last year it lasted over 8 hours. The goal of the day is to provide the public and the Board of Ed with a full view of the district and its budget, providing context rather than having each cost center present piece by piece over the course of many board meetings. We continue to believe that this is the right way in which to present the budget and gives the community and the Board of Education greater insight into the district as a whole. Okay, this slide highlights other town meetings that will take place. As of tonight, there are a number of dates for both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. that have not been posted. Once those dates are confirmed, we'll be sure to communicate those to the school community and to the public. And again, they'll be posted on our website. You'll also notice that the district's capital improvement budget, which has been approved by the Board of Education, will be discussed at both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance meetings. We encourage our families in community to engage in the budget process. I know you're not shy, and communicate with us along the way. We'll be seeking out opportunities as well to engage and listen to the public, those that are a part of our community, the Ridgefield Public Schools, but also those that are not part of our public schools. So to begin, our returning Board of Education members know that the budget is built on the district's mission, which is highlighted here. I'll give everyone just a few seconds to read it and conceptualize its meaning. A mission represents the district's values and purpose. It's intended to be a commitment made by the Board of Education, the administration, and the school community, while the district's budget has the responsibility to operationalize that mission. As we make budget decisions, we keep in mind how these decisions may or may not impact our ability to fulfill the district's mission. Displayed here is the district's vision of the graduate. Again, for those that are new to RPS or to the Board of Education, our vision of the graduate was created a number of years ago with a variety of stakeholders. It's different than the district's mission in that the vision of the graduate looks at outcomes. Its purpose is to codify what we expect from a student graduating the Ridgefield Public Schools. That said, though, the work of the vision of the graduate begins in preschool if they come to us for preschool, or kindergarten, each of us contributing throughout a student's educational experience, culminating in their transition from the Ridgefield Public Schools into the world as young adults. On January 22nd, you will hear how each of our cost centers describe how their work contributes to this vision of the graduate. Throughout the budget process, we frame our conversations by asking ourselves, what do Ridgefield students deserve? I know that we would agree that our students deserve a world-class education, a district that continues to get better and better, that continues to move, that doesn't simply stay afloat, adults who advocate on behalf of their students and care deeply, and provide a safe and secure environment that's both engaging and joyful. With all of this front in mind, as part of our budget process, our leadership team works independently and collectively to study and review. We look at our past budgets, not just this past year, but years before that. We look at trends in education and associated costs so we can predict some of what might be coming our way. We look at enrollment data and projections and how they may or may not have actualized. We look at the staffing changes and needs, our fixed costs, inflation, specifically with supply shortages, as most of us know by now, and certainly we could speak to our boardroom, just accessing the equipment is difficult. And then of course, there's the costs associated with that equipment. And that's just not even just with equipment, it seems to be across the line. Efficiencies, possibly a redirection of resources. And it's done in combination of a line by line review with each cost center, frequently throughout the budget process, and again, collaboratively. My role in the process is to partner with my colleagues and, just based on the data that I just referred to, identify the current state of the district. Where are we right now? Prioritize the most significant needs of the district, support the district in continuing to be steady and strong, set the destination, and continuously move the district forward in a purposeful, yet at times very incremental way. Generally, the budget process and my role doesn't change year to year, but yet dependent on the first two bullets, the current state of the district and the priorities, the remaining three, supporting the district and continuing to be steady and strong, setting the destination, and moving the district forward, can be more challenging. Now I'll provide you with the landscape and the context in which this budget was developed. As we discuss fiscal year 2023, it's equally important to look back to understand how the district's been funded leading into fiscal year 2023. In fiscal year 21, the Board of Finance increased the school board budget by 1.75% increase. You might remember at that time there wasn't a referendum due to COVID. In fiscal year 2022, the Board of Finance presented a 2.35% budget to referendum, which was approved at 2.35%. So the administration did face two incredibly conservative budgets in a row, requiring the district to prioritize the greatest need. But equally, if not more important, both of the years, students were beginning to feel the short-term impact and staff of COVID-19. As you will see from my presentation this evening, the fiscal year 2023 and likely future year budgets will reflect the residual impacts that we're seeing of the pandemic on our children. When looking at budgets and the story of our students, we look to see the return on our financial investment. Despite the challenges of the past few years, Ridgefield continues to be recognized as one of Connecticut's premier school districts. Our students continue to evidence their strengths and talents academically, as well as in the athletics, visual, performing arts, clubs, and programs. You actually heard that from me and from our student representative this evening. Just a few of the many accolades of the past year include National Merit Scholars, spots at the Connecticut Music Educators Festival. We've received awards in Invention Convention and finalists actually in Invention Convention. We've had state championships in skiing and boys lacrosse, and almost 100 seniors receiving the seal of biliteracy. Some of our students were accepted to top colleges and universities such as Duke, Harvard, MIT, UConn, Tulane, Tufts, Northeastern. All of that said, I do want to highlight that COVID has changed things, and there is a greater focus on the whole child, their experience, their journey. And we don't doubt that our ability to compete beyond SAT scores will be critical in years to come. Many colleges and universities, many of you already know, have placed less emphasis on testing and more on the story of the student. Student participation and our availability of courses, performance and rigorous course offerings, after-school clubs, extracurricular activities, and their work beyond the four walls of the academic classroom will be more important than ever. We continue to be proud of our students and educators while also recognizing that we need to compete through a different lens. While there may be less of an emphasis on standardized test scores, they are a measure that historically has been used to provide insight onto the district's spending relative to student performance. So this is a hard chart to read because it's during a hybrid scenario. This is our Connecticut SAT Spring 21 data that we use the hybrid model because it was the learning model that had the largest populations of students. So it's hard to try to make comparisons in that particular year, and you'll see the same in ELA. But what this data source does provide insight into, if you look at it in mathematics, for example, is other financial investments. You're going to hear tonight about a new math resource at the elementary level, as well as you've already heard about algebra and geometry labs. The supervisor that we hired last year in math science, our work in math placement, all of this data does contribute. This data and a lot of other data contributes to those financial decisions and certainly educational decisions. Similarly, this chart shows our ELA performance. Again, it's in the hybrid model because it was the one that we used the most. Again, hard to make comparisons in this particular environment. What you see here, though, is spending comparisons across DIRG A. For those of you that are new, we are grouped in what we call a DIRG, DRG, District Reference Group. And ours is called District Reference Group A. And basically those school districts that have a similar socioeconomic and demographic composition are grouped together. And we typically use this group when comparing academic and student performance. We use our regional group when we're deciding weather decisions, but when it comes to comparing our academic performance, this is the group that we typically align ourselves with. And so what we can say generally, very generally, is that school districts that spend more perform better on these types of assessments. So as I mentioned before, it's more important than ever that we begin, when we start making comparisons, that we're comparing not only standardized test scores, but we're looking at our course offerings. How many of our children are participating in those course offerings, rigorous ones? What is their achievement like? What are the extracurricular activities? What do we have available for our kids? And what is the work, whether it's in a particular content area or outside of a content area, that kids are engaged in outside of their classroom? To provide further context on our budget landscape, this fall, our students returned to full-time in-school learning for the first time since March of 2020. You've heard us talk about it before. So for a second grader, it might have been the first time this year that they've actually gone to school in a quote unquote typical year, which I think is even a little bit of a stretch. The student learning experience for 2020 and 2021 varied significantly from one student to the next. So we know that students came from other districts and their experience was different. We have students who returned from homeschooling. We have students who learned virtually for the entire year. Some students who were in hybrid. Some students had supports at home and others did not. Research in our school-based data that we've collected so far, both qualitatively and quantitatively, show that children's social emotional wellness and their academic gains were negatively impacted since March of 2020. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone, but certainly a point to mention with respect to context. Further context is that our enrollment increased by 90 students in the 21-22 school year, and that actually does not include pre-K. So that's projected to actual. So we went up from projected to actual by 90 kids, again, not including our preschool. This impacted the school budget by nearly $2 million if you're doing a cost per student and multiplying that by the number of kids. Again, didn't include preschool. Most obvious impact for us was staffing. We faced the start of the school year with an unbudgeted 4.5 additional FTE. Trends in special education are showing increases in students with complex need. Dr. Handway presented earlier on the year and is planning on presenting again January 24th before she presents to the Board of Finance. But trends in special education are showing increases in students with complex needs, as well as an overall increase in students with disabilities. The types of outplacements have also changed. We had 39 students enter into the Ridgefield Public Schools with existing IEPs services this fall, also including outplacements. So on average, we might expect 20 to 25 new students. However, we have about 39. And it's important to note that Ridgefield is required to provide comparable services in these circumstances. So kids coming into us, we have to provide a comparable service to what they were receiving. These numbers are separate from our known students that we predicted might enter into an IEP, students that we were seeing transition between MTSS and Tier 3, whether that's behaviorally or academically. To provide further context, the average cost of a student with an IEP is 2 to 2.5 times the per pupil. So let's just say $25,000. On the low end, you're about $50,000. So if you take an additional 50 kids times $50,000, those were additional costs. Also, the state decided to use ARP funds in the shift for excess cost reimbursement. So that ceiling shifted from $92,000 to $97,000. You'll hear us talk about that tomorrow, more than likely at the 7:30 legislative meeting, making it more challenging for us to hit the ceiling where we could seek out reimbursement. So it's unfortunate that you almost feel like you were double hit. They gave you a gift and then took it away. The trends in special education are forcing us to reassess our current structures to meet the legal requirements and compliance with the law that is a part of students' IEPs. Lastly, crisis intervention and acute mental health needs have been highlighted across schools. We're seeing a greater need for 211, 911, and crisis team intervention for all populations of students. And the entire faculty takes ownership over these needs, whether it's certified, non-certified administration. They're all part of a student when they're in crisis. The budget for this year. Our current enrollment, excluding preschool, is 4,529 children. With preschool, we have a total of 4,578 students enrolled in the Ridgefield Public Schools. It's important to note that we are fully funded for preschool. Any tuition revenue is provided back to the town. It does not go into our budget. Our projections last year were 4,439 students. As mentioned before, that's excluding preschool. We were up by 90 students. Per pupil spending last year was just about $22,000. So just a little bit over $1.8 million, a little under $2 million. Ridgefield does not budget for contingency staffing. So for our new board members, what that means is any additional staff or salaries that were not included in the budget are added on. So for example, that 4.5 staff members, any change that was unplanned for has to be covered. So for example, when a crisis calls for additional staff hours, someone to be here after school or on the weekends, or we need additional testing for students with IEPs or contact tracing that's required outside of the school day, all of those are unbudgeted expenses. As I mentioned earlier, we have the additional 4.5 FTE. We had 2 educators at the elementary level that we had to hire in order to maintain the class size guidelines, an additional 2.5 in special education to meet our legal obligations as a result of IEPs. There are times when we have turnover savings, which means that we've hired teachers that are less expensive or hired staff that are less expensive than staff that may be retiring. That would assist in covering for those unbudgeted expenses. However, this year we did not make the savings needed. And in fact, it actually gave us another shortfall of about $54,000. So again, depending upon the number of individuals you have retiring or resigning and the number of individuals you have that you've hired and what their hire rate is would determine that turnover. And this year, ultimately, we were short about $54,000. Shown here are the enrollment projections for next year using the high projection formula. While projections are just projections, they're often talked about, and especially with declining enrollment, which is always raised with respect to the budget. While we're not seeing that decline yet, I think it is important that I again remind everyone that K-8 is staffed according to class size guidelines and adjusts enrollment accordingly. There's really no subjectivity there. When it comes to the high school, if the decline actually actualizes, let's just say the decline actualizes from this enrollment projections to what we're determining for next year, we would lose only about 44 students. So it's important that we have a common understanding. So in order to reduce FTEs at the high school, we basically need to spread those 44 children across the same grade level and same class, which we all know is a scenario that's highly unlikely. Earlier, I provided context in which this budget was developed. First, all of our schools, all of them are experiencing an increase in acute student crises and mental health challenges. When I say acute, the reason I say acute is at this point, we haven't determined whether or not these are going to be long-term issues or whether they're short-term. We are seeing moments for students, not necessarily students that are going to need counseling in their IEP. That certainly may happen. But what we're seeing right now is those acute mental health issues and student crises. The challenges facing our students are not generalized to students with disabilities or perhaps secondary level students that you might expect. It's really across all of our schools and age continuum. We're seeing increased calls to 211, 911, social services, DCF with respect to their services that are offered to families. Our special services department, staff, the principals, teachers are navigating acute crises in ways that we've just not experienced in the past. And again, I can speak for other districts and with respect to this because I do know that it is a common theme. It's not unique to Ridgefield. Next, you'll notice that the fiscal year 2023 budget has a focus on special education. This is due to both increases in the number of students requiring special education and related services, as well as the complexity of the student that is receiving these services. So it's not just about the number, but what is actually in their IEP to be able to provide them with the most appropriate services. And so their complexity is also another challenge. The weight on the special education and other staff is just simply unsustainable. Much of the budget requests are focused on our ability to comply with our legal obligations related to students with IEPs. As important and reflected in this budget and stemming from the budget goals of fiscal year 2022 and our district's priorities this year, we're focused on providing assured experiences for all of our students across schools and classrooms. This past year and our priorities this year are to focus on solidifying the foundation, our systems and structures, filling in the weak spots so that we can move past the fundamentals in years to come. I think that you've noticed that our progress can be seen across curriculum, instruction, resources, and assessment tools. Like fiscal year 2022, 2023 will continue to work on the foundation and assured experiences. This budget will continue to see the implementation of a phonemic awareness curriculum as we move up the grades, as well as high leverage early literacy work, such as the implementation of a phonics program. This is in addition to the work in early numeracy with a new primary resource, which you'll hear more about on January 24th. It's starting to feel like a really heavy agenda, sorry. Continued in this budget is the support for students in algebra and geometry, as is the continuation of our plan to review the curriculum and resources across content areas pre-K to 12. You've already heard some of those presentations in world language and in music. This budget continues to support our class size guidelines, the technology plan that Dr. DeSantis has presented several times over the past year and a half, new courses, choices at RHS, and structures for supporting students academically and emotionally. We will continue to get better and better. The foundational work across departments will continue to set the stage for future innovation and creativity. So it's critical that we continue to move forward. The fiscal year 2023 budget does require a focus on supporting the whole child. There's no doubt the acute crises needs that we're seeing with our kids, as well as tending to the trends that we're seeing in special education, both short and long term. Highlighted here are our budget decision additions and reductions, which I will briefly describe each. You're going to hear more about these from our principals and our school-based leaders on the 22nd. You'll notice staffing requests in special education and related services. So you're going to see a 1.5 increase in SLP, a 0.5 occupational therapist, 1.0 teacher of special education and reading. That is specific to the two middle schools. It's a 0.5 in each, and it's specific to the teaching of just students who are dyslexic. We have an increase in our preschool needs, so a 0.5 preschool teacher and a 1.0 RHS special education teacher. These additions are focused on compliance and legal requirements. It's really not a program shift. So again, just to meet our legal obligations, that's where that staffing comes in. What you'll see somewhat parallel to the positions in the additions and the reductions on the right-hand side is a direct result of the trends and the needs that we're seeing in special education and also just in the counseling department. What we did do was expand the work of special education department chair and the guidance chair by growing the positions to 12 months and including supervision and evaluation responsibilities. While doing this, though, we removed an AP from the high school. And so I know that that's been a conversation that has happened in years past, but I want to be really clear, and I know Dr. Greenwood will be really clear on the 22nd, this is not due to enrollment. Truly, it was an opportunity to look at the leadership structure, see the trends that we're seeing in special education, the greatest level of needs, restructure while finding savings in the budget. The special education position on the left-hand side includes a 0.2 teaching assignment. So it's really not teaching, but likely more assessing, in particular during the summer months. So again, I just want to be clear, the parallel, we have the 0.8, 1.0 special education counseling supervisor positions, and the shift on the opposite side with reductions are the 0.4 special education department chair, 0.4 special education teacher, 0.4 guidance department chair, 0.6 counselor, and the 1.0 assistant principal. So that yields in the budget about $100,000 from that restructure. But more importantly, it gives us a real targeted focus on what the needs are from a supervision evaluation standpoint and from a student perspective. We are including a 1.4, it's really along those lines, 1.4 elementary supervisor increase. These positions are actually focused on our 3 larger elementary schools. We're revisiting the structures for our 3 smaller schools, where they'll continue to have 3 part-time supervisors. We'll describe why this 1.4 fits in during our cost center meetings on the 22nd, but a 1.4 increase. And this increase really, the size of the schools played a role, but quite frankly, in the decision-making process, it wasn't just that. It was the student population, the number and length of meetings, the acute crises. We're finding that our principals with a half-time supervisor, when they're tending to one responsibility, if they have no one in the building in a situation of crisis, they're left pretty vulnerable. And so that's where you see that increase, the 1.4 there. The 1.0 SRBI MTSS behavior interventionist, that's actually a 0.5 in each of our middle schools. Our 2 middle schools will share 1 SRBI behavior interventionist whose responsibilities are primarily to be it's actually both proactive and reactive. And it's a little bit different at the elementary, but not that much different. Both schools have seen a substantial increase in the volume of crises, the issues around cyberbullying and social media, that they felt strongly that they need support to be able to meet the needs of kids. We are recommending a district-wide elementary math coach. The primary role of this individual is to support the implementation of the new mathematics primary resource, along with professional learning for our teachers and our current interventionists. Again, you'll hear more about the mathematics study on January 24th and where we are with that recommendation. Lastly, we're asking for an additional 1.0 FTE for a network technician. This is really based on the number of devices and hardware in the district, and our staff just can't keep up. So let me just go to the right-hand side with respect to the reductions. As communicated earlier, we have the restructure at the high school. So that really brings us all the way down to the nurse. We have 1 unfilled nursing position right now that we believe we can absorb unless something changes over the summer, which again, speaks to the contingency issue. But right now we believe that we can absorb 1.0 nurse. So we're going to reduce the budget by 1.0. We also have a 0.5 technology integrator that serves the high school. We're not at all suggesting that we don't need technology support, but quite frankly, 0.5 just does not seem to be enough to support the capacity of such a large high school. So at this point, we're making a recommendation to reduce the budget by 0.5 technology integrator. It's important to note that what's not included here in this budget is the additional, so you'll see this in the staffing, which may be confusing. We have the 2.0 additional staff at the elementary level that we hired this year due to class size, 2.5 in special education. We also have a reduction of 0.6 at Erms Middle School just based on enrollment. So what you're not seeing here is the additional 4.5 that are already in the budget now due to the summer shifts. Okay, listed here are additional budget costs not related to FTE. So we have a mathematics curriculum resource. Our plan is for 3 grade levels next year. That's about $132,000 as a placeholder. Like I said before, we'll talk more about where we are, but we were able to look at the programs that we're studying and identify approximate costs. We have a phonics resource. You might remember that we did budget for phonics this past school year. What was budgeted from the curriculum department at that time was enough to purchase some teacher resources. It was not enough to purchase them all. So as we begin the implementation, we're looking for additional funding that will support the resources that we need for teachers, for kids, alongside the professional learning. You may remember from Athletic Director Street's presentation a few weeks back that adding into the budget that is currently costs absorbed by parents are pay to participate fees and weight room fees. This is not the entire cost of pay to participate, but you may remember that Mr. Street proposed a model over 5 years which would reduce the costs to no cost to parents over the course of 5 years. and technology hardware that were part of Dr. DeSantis's plan that he's communicated with the Board of Education several times. Mitigating some of our costs on the parallel here is the cost of or transportation. We've reduced the budget by about $120,000 in hopes that we get 2 buses, unless the supply shortage, like our tech room and everything else, doesn't bring us 2 buses. So I'm wishing for 2 10-passenger buses like I wished for snow this past week. We've been lowered our insurance. We had a ceiling of 4%. You may remember many conversations in budget meetings around insurance and getting a really close price so that our budget was more accurate. We have a ceiling of 4%. We lowered it to 3%, leaving us very little wiggle room. But to propose this budget this year, we felt like it was worth a shot. We looked at the curriculum team, technology team, looked at every subscription we had in the district, literally every one, looked at usage, looked at how those resources are used, their purpose, where they can combine them. But they also looked at short-term subscription costs versus long-term. Oftentimes, we don't want to buy into something for 6 years that we're not going to use, so we had to be careful with that. But the short-term subscription cost could be double or triple what a subscription cost could be if we purchased it for 3 years. So we shifted some of our short-term subscription costs. The superintendent's proposed budget totals for next year is $107,356,731. This is an increase of a 4.98% over last year, $5,096,044. Salaries and benefits alone would have increased the budget to a little bit over 2%, over $2 million. Thus, again, as I said, the administration looked for as many offsets and efficiencies that we could within the budget. Assumptions within this budget is enrollment, just like it is every year. And you can see that it didn't favor us this past year. Contingency, which I spoke about earlier, staff turnover. If there is any impact of COVID-19, which I think now will be around student learning, MTSS, those supports, certainly special education, and excess cost reimbursement. We also have other costs such as supply shortages, which I also spoke about earlier, inflation across all domains, across really everything. There isn't anything that doesn't seem to have increased in terms of price. Our contractual obligations, cost of health insurance, OPEB, liability, and workman's comp. So this chart displays the budget by major object. All expenses are assigned into an object category, and then objects are used to categorize the nature of the goods or services within the budget. They're used to keep track of all our financial transactions, allowing for the measurement, processing, and communication of an expense. This is one way to look at numbers. I'm going to show you a few different ways. The analysis here by object breaks the detail into smaller sections for review, tracking, and comparison. When you receive your budget book, it will offer a look at the expenses by object and can be read by using the detail in the user guide, which won't mean anything to you now if you're new, but it will soon. There's a tab called user guide. So the non-certified salaries are the 4 union contracts: nurses, paras, secretaries, custodians. You know who the certified is. Employee benefits, we assumed a 3% increase for health insurance. Like I said, that is that lowers the cap by 1% from what our broker provided us, intentionally to keep the budget down. Transportation includes district transportation, out of district, athletic, AM, PM transportation, our 18 to 22 program. We've talked about that a little bit at one of our more recent board meetings. This also includes the contractual increase. Our contract is expected to expire on June 30th, 2023, for a future conversation as well. We have project repairs and maintenance that consists of building repairs, contracted services for the athletic fields. As you know, we divide that cost in thirds. So the town pays for a third, the users pay for a third, and the district pays for a third. It includes security, rubbish removal, our school resource officers. We pay for our school resource officers, their uniforms from A to Z in school projects. We have special education outplacement tuition that's based on our current population as well as some assumptions. Energy includes electric, gas, fuel, and oil for the district. Supplies and equipment, this is where we've seen significant increases relative to inflation. It consists of instructional materials, office supplies, standardized testing materials, scheduling materials, materials for athletics, cleaning, district equipment, both for building and curriculum. And all other might seem like it's like just a kind of thrown in there, but it's really not. It consists of liability expenses, which I think are estimated at a 5% increase, postage, advertising, printing, mileage. I guess it does include a lot of things, purchase services, athletics, textbooks, library collections, things like that. This chart here has the same objects, but displays the data by percentage of the budget. So you can see the category there, the budget, and then how much of the budget is being taken up by that particular amount. So you'll notice right off the bat, salaries and employee benefits, takes up about 80% of our budget. So 60% with the salaries and another 19% with employee benefits. So just there alone is about 20% of our budget. This chart illustrates the budget by major category. It's different than by major object, only in that the grouping of major categories versus major object. Again, it's high-level analysis of the proposed budget and the increases in each major category and the percentage of the increase. So if you look at certified salaries, you'll see what we had this year, what's obligated next year, what the increase is, and the percentage of increase. So it's giving you the data just in lots of different forms. The next chart takes those same categories and highlights them by percentage of the budget. So you can see in this graphic, again, salaries and benefits consume 80% of the budget, and this is by major category. Okay, the next chart here shows the percentage increase by category. So again, you have the category, the percentage of the budget, and the amount that is increased. How much is allocated towards each category of the budget. And here, this chart shows 5 years of budget comparison. So you'll notice that the past 5 years, we've had generally conservative budgets. So going back to 17-18, 2.5, 2.55, in 19-20, there was a 3.36, 1.75, 2.35. So even if we think about contractual obligations alone, these have been really conservative budgets. This gives you the data a little bit differently. So this is past budget, 6 years of data. So you can see the requested percentage increase ultimately from the Board of Education and where the final budget landed. The 2016-17 year, I think there was a requested budget of nearly 6%. And you can see where the final budget landed, what the approved budget was, and the increase. And that little number of 4.98 will shift depending upon where the Board of Education lands with the budget. Okay. So my presentation tonight, hopefully if you were able to follow along, because I know there were a lot of slides and a lot of words, provided the context of the budget process, the landscape, the budget itself, and now I'll end where we hope to go. As communicated earlier, in partnership with my colleagues, we have a great team here at the Ridgefield Public Schools, who, by the way, they lean on their teachers, right? So when they're preparing their budgets, they're checking in with their teachers, they're going into their classrooms, to identify the needs. A recent example, I went into a family consumer science class and there was an issue with the dishwasher. And I asked that teacher, what about the dishwasher? And he said he had already communicated with his principal to have it, in the budget for this coming year. So there's a lot of conversations. Our teachers are very responsible when it comes to the budget as well. But as communicated earlier and in partnership with my colleagues, my role is to identify the current state of the district. I hope I've done that for you tonight. Prioritize the most significant needs, support the district in continuing to be steady and strong, set the destination, and continuously move the district forward in a purposeful yet incremental way. And we are continuing to move in a purposeful way. You've already begun to hear about the work that's happening across our content areas beyond the core academic areas. We're not just focusing on reading and math. Each of those presentations always includes a look ahead, whether that's in music or world language, writing, which you'll hear more about tonight. All of them look towards continued innovation and growth. Our priorities this year include a forward-thinking committee. This group will look at the work that we've begun, as well as best practices near and also those best practices far away from us. We recognize that trends in education and costs associated with those trends will require us to think creatively to develop strong programs in district and to save costs. Those are directly related to students in some cases, and indirectly, let's just say, with the costs of transportation. Richfield is fortunate. I know that we all agree there that we have outstanding kids, high caliber, invested educators, engaged families, and an active community. Together, I think, and even in the toughest of climates, we've continued to grow, and we should be proud of that. That said, as anticipated, the world has changed. Expected outcomes of student indicators looks different. And the fiscal year 2023 continues to provide for a strong base. In our work this year, remember, we begin the budget in October. And so a lot of times we're starting the work while we're in the work. But our work this year and next will set the stage for years ahead. It's true that there are greater opportunities for innovation that we would have had hoped to recommend in this budget, some of which you've already learned about through our curriculum presentations or the series of curriculum presentations that we've had. You can expect more to hear more about these proposals in future budgets. These are important to us, and we plan and intend on bringing them forward. That said, as we are continuing to move the district forward, we're not hitting pause, but we do need to think about what the priorities are this year. And the Board of Education, at least in my short experience here, while supportive, I think you always ask good questions. Some of them are really hard, but they're always good. We have good debates. You push the administration to think creatively. And I think a lot of times that's why we've come to you with different ideas. I look forward to the same this budget season, to the community's partnership and feedback throughout the budget season. Don't limit it to when you have to make a decision about the budget. That's why we're here. And so hopefully the next couple of months will be fruitful in that way. And that is it for me.
Thank you, Dr. De Silva. That was very, very thorough, although I'm sure there will be a lot of questions once we get into the budget book tomorrow. Does anybody have any questions for tonight? Rachel, then Sean, then Liz.
Hey, first of all, I just want to thank you, Dr. De Silva, and the administration for the amount of hard work, time, and thoughtfulness that has gone into presenting a school budget to us and to the entire RPS community this evening. I made a comment in the beginning of the pandemic, and this was the time to lean into education. And I meant it with my whole heart. And what I said then has proven true over and over these past months. We must invest in education. We must invest in our children. And by doing so, we are investing in our community. So with that said, I am definitely looking forward to our all-day budget review, where each cost center will be presenting to the board on Saturday, January 22nd, and we'll be able to ask questions on behalf of our community at large. But thank you again for your presentation. I look forward to reviewing the budget and investing in our children's academic, social, and emotional well-being. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Next, we had Sean and then Liz.
Yeah, thanks for the deep dive on this. I'm a big fan of zero-based budgeting. It's obvious you went back in time and looked at the prior budgets before you got here, and also started kind of from ground zero with some of the staffing, which is great. And people can quibble about half an FTE here and there. The one I'm hoping that we're heading off at the pass is the ugly conversation we've now had for, I think, 3 years running, where we have some huge insurance number and then all of a sudden it comes in lower and saves the day. And we all agreed, I think, last year that we weren't going to do that again. Are we not going to do that again?
Well, I think we've already not done that again. The cap was 4%. We've lowered it to 3%. I think, is there a chance, Sean, that they could cut, our final number could be 2% or 1%? Of course there is. I'm hopeful in the end that it is. But in our position, we really did push hard on our broker, and we had conversations with him to give us really the best that he could in terms of a cap, so that we weren't in that position, not only for ourselves, for our Board of Education, but just publicly, we just didn't want to be in that position. So that's why originally the budget was created with the 4% cap, and we elected to try to get the budget down by going to 3%. That said, is a little bit of a gamble either way, for sure. But I think that 3% is okay. It's a good number.
The problem is we're still guessing, and I think we all agreed that we were going to work with our insurance agent on a different timeline that gives us the real number, like now. And it sounds like we didn't do that again, and I'm a little concerned.
Sean, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. De Silva, but I think we had said we wanted that final number in February.
Yeah, we did. And so I was hesitant for a minute, Ken, because I couldn't remember if it was February or March, but I think your timeline is right. I'd have to go back to my notes, but we did Sean, you may have been at that meeting where we invited him in. So I will go back to my notes, Sean, and let you know what we asked him for.
Honestly, I don't care what the date is. I'm just, I want to make sure that we're covering that off, because we don't have it right now. And if we have it in, 3 weeks before the budget is really set, that's awesome. But I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement that that's still a concern.
Understood.
Yeah, I think Sean, the plan is to get that number before we finalize, before we send our budget.
For the Board of Education votes on the budget, yes.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Liz.
Yeah, thank you. Susie, thank you for going through or Dr. De Silva, thank you for going through the rationale for the budget and the walkthrough. I appreciate that. My question is a bit more of an ask than a question on why we're seeing so much increase in mental health and what we plan to do about the root cause of it, versus just, I recognize and respect that the principals need support with acute issues. The concern I have is that doesn't solve the problem. And I think we all know that the divisiveness in the country, the mask wearing and the mask adherence principles, the shields, the distancing, the treating kids who are unvaccinated separately from those that are, there are a lot of factors that are causing that mental health at the school level. And if we don't solve for them, we can add all the staff in the world. So I'd like to have a conversation about that, and recognizing that the budget ask includes a lot of staff and not one teacher is highly concerning to me as well. And so I think, talking through those factors is really something that I would expect on the 22nd. And I hope that the community will ask questions about the curriculum areas that they're concerned about there as well. Because classroom teachers have been something that the community has certainly weighed in on in the past. So I would just ask that those two things be considered as part of the conversation for the more detailed board book conversations. I also want to make sure that we're thinking about any unfunded mandate courses that are coming down from the state and any curriculum recommendations that are coming down from the state, and make sure that those are included in the budget conversations up front, as well as the increase in gas prices and what's going to happen with our transportation budget. So these are just more asks than they are discussion points. And then one final statement that I'd like to make sure that the community hears is Richfield is about to be reassessed on every single property to 70% of assessed value as of October 1st. This is going to be a significant tax increase, most likely for a lot of our owners and or landlords. And so this needs to be considered as the whole Ridgefield stakeholder is considered as part of this. Well, you state it's conservative, significantly higher than prior years in an area where we've still got expenditures related to other things to mitigate. So those are things that I think we do need to recognize as part of the community representation for Ridgefield.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? None for, oh, Selena.
First of all, I want to say, Dr. De Silva, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. Obviously, you put so much work into that. And thanks for all the work you did over Christmas break. I'm sure we had a lot more fun than you did. Regarding the mental health issues and children, I think that you probably have access to some therapists and doctors. And if you don't, I'd be glad to invite some speakers to come and talk maybe, or even give a presentation at one of the Board of Ed meetings to speak to the mental health issues. I think it's probably a little bit bigger than masks and that sort of thing, because the last 2 years have been traumatic, I think, for all of us. Actually, the pandemic has caused a lot of stress, economic stress, and that sort of thing. So I think that's a good idea, actually, to have doctors or therapists speak to the Board of Ed and maybe do a presentation. So I'd welcome that opportunity as well. I don't think actually any of us as a group are educated to speak to those conditions. So I think probably, it would require somebody much more educated in that field than any of us.
Thank you, Selena. Liz?
Yeah, just to be clear, if we do invite a therapist, I'd like to make sure that they aren't affiliated with a nonprofit that any of the board is a member of, principal of, or on the board of directors for. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions for Dr. De Silva for tonight? I know there will be plenty on Saturday, 2 Saturdays from now.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And we can move on to the next, again, meaty topic. Discussion item B, RHS Counseling Department update.
All right, waiting patiently. We have Dr. Greenwood, Dr. Hanaway, I think Mr. Pepe, Mr. Houlihan. Dr. Hanaway, are you setting up, or is Dr. Greenwood?
I got this one, Susie.
All right.
Ready? Well, thanks for having us tonight, everyone. Tonight, I'm pleased to introduce to you Mr. Terrence Houlihan. He's our Director of Counseling. He's going to present an update to the April presentation on some new initiatives in counseling that we're rolling out this year. He'll also spend a little time introducing himself, so you get to know him. And he's going to also walk you through some initiatives that he's picked up this year and show you how they'll bring us into the future. So at the end, we'll obviously answer some questions, but without further ado, especially in the interest of time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Houlihan, if that's okay.
Thanks very much, Dr. Greenwood. Good evening, everyone. I'm Terry Houlihan, and very happy to be here with all of you, sharing some exciting updates. I am brand new to the Ridgefield community, and just to give you a little bit of a background to myself, I am just coming up on my 26th year in secondary education. And in addition to my work as the counseling chair, I'm also a part-time adjunct lecturer at the City University of New York in the Graduate School of Education, teaching classes to graduate students on organizational leadership and also counselor education. So far, this has been a wonderful experience for me. It's a very welcoming community, working closely with Dr. Hanaway, Dr. Greenwood, and Mr. Pepe. It's been wonderful. the staff of counselors, and the entire Ridgefield community has just been incredibly welcoming. So let's get into it. Next slide, please. So as Dr. Greenwood said, the primary purpose here is to give you an update to a presentation that occurred on April 6th. And a couple of things were presented there in terms of being initiatives. First and foremost, the new developmental school counseling lessons, a professional development experience for school counselors on DBT or dialectical behavioral therapy, and then the College Conference Center. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. It may not necessarily be in that specific order, but the order in which I do present will make sense. Next slide, please. So just a quick update. Even though the word therapy is in there, it's a little misleading in terms of what we experienced as school counselors. Just as a quick overview, school counselors are not therapists. School counselors are part of the educational staff within a school building. Specific mental health professionals like licensed clinical social workers, psychologists, psychoanalysts, et cetera, they provide much more in-depth therapy for people. What we received is something along the lines of skills coaching. And this took place on November 2nd. And it was a morning professional development experience. It was very educational and it was interactive. In addition to school counseling staff being there, the special education staff was present as well. And what it gave us an opportunity to do was to implement some of the core principles associated with DBT, things along the lines of emotional regulation, the ability to sort of deal with distress, mindfulness, and the ability to relate to others. And listening to some of the conversation earlier, all of us are very, very conscious of how mental health needs are front and center, especially for our adolescents and children. As I said before, this is not therapy. It's more along the lines of short-term intervention. So for example, if a student does come into a school counselor's office experiencing some distress, in addition to our training with solution-focused brief counseling or cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, we now have another set of tools, no different than a plumber or an electrician showing up on a job site and being able to reach into their bag of tools and decide, do I need a flathead? Do I need a Phillips screwdriver? So this experience gave us a wider repertoire of tools to use in those short-term interventions. Next slide, please. So with regards to the developmental school counseling lessons, just to be clear, historically at Ridgefield High School, counselors did go into classrooms, but it wasn't necessarily consistent and it didn't necessarily follow a specific pattern. One of the things that was explained to me very early on, even before I was hired at Ridgefield High School, was that this was a program that was going to be implemented for each and every single grade level, 5 consecutive lessons. And developmentally, each grade level would have essentially the first 5 sessions of each quarter. And underneath each grade level, you'll see some bullet points that just sort of describe some of the topics that we had covered with students. So across the board, what we're seeing in school systems and in line with the American School Counselor Association and Connecticut School Counselor Association is that in addition to those individual meetings, some of the most effective ways in which school counselors work with students is in a classroom setting. The outdated model of consistent one-on-one meetings in a sort of therapeutic model just isn't sustainable anymore. So in the first quarter, we did meet with seniors, and the bulk of that work was really finalizing the college search and the application process for students. Recently, we met with 9th grade students where we worked on study skills, understanding a transcript, and basically the transition into high school. Coming up very shortly, we'll be meeting with juniors on initiating the college search and the timelines associated with applying to college. And then finally, in the fourth quarter, we will be working with our sophomores, where we'll be doing a little bit more on career inventories, self-exploration, and the building of resumes. The picture that you're looking at is actually the new classroom that was just built. You can see it. You can see a ladder and some other materials there. This is in the stages of it actually being constructed. So that's an ideal classroom setting. Those walls will be frosted to allow for a certain amount of privacy. Next slide, please. All right, so one of the things that's really important to note, and I picked up on this, was a question that was asked at the previous presentation in terms of, how are we going to know whether or not this is effective? And one of the things that school counselors do, and the movement within school counseling, is to do what we call pre and post test results. Because, for lack of a better expression, guidance counselors in the 70s and 80s and 90s would essentially think something was a good idea because they thought it was a good idea. And one of the things that we know in education today is we have to check in with students to see exactly where they are at, not just by giving them tests, not just by assigning homework, but we can utilize simple programs like Google Forms to get access to real-time data. So in the next couple of slides, what you'll see are some pie charts which give us evidence of where students are at. What we decided to do was to design very short-term Likert scale-based questions. So these are just some of the examples. The question is, how far along are you in the post-secondary process in terms of college applications, trade school, etc.? Now, this first graph over here, what I'm looking at is essentially to my left. This is the one that has all the Likert scales. This is what students reported in the very beginning. And then over to the right is what they reported at the end. And what you'll see is that as a result of these sessions, there was an increase in 10% of students who've submitted or just have to click submit. Now, these sessions ended back in October. So we are at an entirely different point in the college application process currently in January. Next slide, please. What you'll see here in this particular example is that the percentage of students who were worried or overwhelmed decreased. And as a result of this survey, anyone who disclosed as being overwhelmed or rated themselves number 5 on the Likert scale also met with a school counselor. So one of the things that's really crucial about these types of surveys is, in addition to giving us access to data, it also lets us know which students are in greatest need. And as a result of that, we can design individual interventions to meet with those students. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's where we see the biggest jump. A very simple question. Please rate your knowledge of the post-secondary planning process. Give you an opportunity to look at those two charts. And you'll see that in the beginning, when we ran this survey, 66% rated themselves a 1 or a 2. And at the end, 79% were a 1 or 2. Next slide, please. Okay, so along the lines of working with seniors, I want to jump in and give an update to the College Conference Center. So this College Conference Center is near the hub of the high school. It's right next to the Student Center, and it's on the opposite side of the Student Life Office. These pictures here were obviously before the spike in Omicron, but we see representatives from different colleges speaking with interested students. And one of the things that I want to provide people with is some insight into the effectiveness of the communication with regards to college rep visits. So I went back and dug a little bit of data, and what we found is in pre-pandemic times, in September of 2019, you'll see that there were 123 visits from college representatives between September 10th to December 5th, and 854 students signed up. This year, remember, pandemic year, everybody in masks. There were 124 rep visits from September 15th to December 6th, and we had over 1,000 students sign up. So as a result of an increase in outreach to the community, to students, we saw an increase in the number of students who registered for these rep visits. Currently, where we're just at about 85% of our seniors have submitted at least one application to a four-year college, averaging about 12 applications per student. And currently, believe it or not, almost 25% of our seniors have already received at least one acceptance letter. Next slide, please. All right, so moving on to our first-year students, our ninth graders. Very simple. We asked the students, have these sessions helped you with identifying resources or identifying people who can assist me? This was based on one of our lessons with regards to transitions. And what we see is that as a result of these lessons, 84% are now better equipped to find the resources at Ridgefield High School. Next slide, please. As a result of these 5 sessions, my transition into Ridgefield High School has been made easier. 65% found these sessions to have been helpful with their transition. In other words, what I'm doing is I'm combining 1 and 2 with the strongly agree and the agree. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an important piece because high school students are required to be more engaged in their assessing process. In other words, they sort of need to have access to these metacognitive skills. So earlier years, a student may have a GPA that just runs at a yearly basis. One of the things that we know is that in high school, the GPA runs with that student. So 9th grade impacts 10th grade, impacts 11th grade, so on and so forth. So one of the things that we did with the 9th graders was we taught them how the grading system works, examples of transcripts. So some people may say, well, why are you giving them, that much information about what happens in 12th grade? It's always good to start with the end in mind, but not overwhelm them with it. So for example, rate your knowledge of how the grading system and transcript at Ridgefield High School works. As a result of these sessions, 36% of our students now have a thorough understanding. So some of them, did hear about GPA before, but you'll see over to the left, there was a very small percentage who had no idea what a transcript or GPA was. Next slide, please. So we did spend some time in terms of those metacognitive skills, teaching them, reviewing with them the most effective ways to study, emphasizing that it's not necessarily the amount of time, but the quality of time. So as a result of this, 78% of our 9th graders felt as if they were better positioned for midterm preparation and other exams as well. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to jump into a couple of other noteworthy items, in particular, talk a little bit about increasing communication, the college planning process, and the transition from 8th grade to 9th grade. Next slide, please. So along the lines of communication, one of the things that I did was reached out very early to Dr. Greenwood and Dr. D about how to set up a YouTube channel. I know that parents are inundated with emails from the school system, from insurance companies, from wherever. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to connect with parents. And during a pandemic, one of the best ways to do it is through videos. In addition to that, I've also updated the Ridgefield High School counseling website and had an opportunity to do a virtual presentation in November with Ridgefield High School parents on parenting teens today. So with regards to the college planning process, is when I first arrived at Ridgefield, one of the things that I'd heard was the junior planning night was actually in March. And I pushed to move that up to December. So myself, another member of the counseling staff, Nicole Usher, and the associate admissions director from University of Notre Dame did a parent presentation for our junior parents. Along the same lines, we are currently planning for Ridgefield High School's first college fair in about 20 years, and that's on April 7th. So one of the things that I do understand is that there are a number of people who have accessed outside college counselors. And no different than somebody who chooses to go to a gym or somebody who chooses to hire a personal trainer, that's fine. I have no opinion on that. But one of the things that I would really like to be able to provide is that no matter what, when you're working with a school counselor from Ridgefield High School, you are going to get exactly what it is that you need to be able to apply to college. And as a parent, you are going to be able to get what you need for your child in terms of applying to college. And then finally, also began collaborating with the middle school counselors from ERMS and CERMS. We are meeting with all counseling staff from the middle school and high school and the high school department chairs in terms of planning for next year's courses. And finally, I just want to make a note of this pre and post test information that I present to you gives us an opportunity to know what's working and know what it is that we need to change. So this, method is something that we will consistently use and consistently rely upon to inform our school counseling practice as we go forward. Next slide. All right. So I guess it's time to.
Yeah, I was going to say, any questions for anyone?
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions from board members? Tina.
I just wanted to thank Dr. Greenwood, and I'm sorry, I can't see where Mr. Terrence went. There's so many squares, but I just wanted to thank you for presenting. I have a child at RHS, and I think the shift that is happening is so important because, when I was a newbie, when we started high school, it was so confusing. There you are, sorry. And it was so confusing. So I'm glad that we're shifting and we're trying to reach out to parents more and more because if you're doing this, I did not go to high school here, went to school in England. This is a whole new process for me. I mean, my kid gets it much better than I do, but of course, when he started high school, he was a 13-year-old, and I'm just using him as an example because it's not for that. Just as an example that when you start high school, you want to make the correct choices, and these kids have these ideas in mind. So whatever you are doing and you want to do, I think it's a great idea. I really applaud that you're trying to reach out to parents. I think having those college nights have been really, from all the feedback I'm hearing from junior parents, have been really appreciated. And I know a lot of parents spend a lot of money on college counselors. That was something I learned as my child is a sophomore this year, that this is something we should start. So I'm glad you're talking that we will get that experience. I also understand that our guidance counselors are heavily burdened. And so, I will hope as we go through this, in the few years or whatever, in the next few months, if there is any way as a board, we can support that. Because in the end, it's about our kids. And as a board of education, it's about our kids. It's about their mental health. We've talked about it. Dr. De Silva mentioned that it's one of the big drivers in our budget, and we talk about mental health. So as guidance, beyond the counseling part, beyond the school, beyond the colleges, how we can support you as a board, I would like to, if there is something we could do, I would really like that to be presented to us. And again, thank you for all that you're doing. I hope to learn more. And oh, sorry, my last point, I would like to understand about the mental health part. I know we talk about this constantly. I know it's a driver too, but I want to understand what, as guidance, if the guidance does anything, is it the school psychologist? Is it the interventionist? How this works at high school at a level, because I think it's still very confusing for parents. I understand we have Dr. Galini as a school psychologist. How does he see children? Who can anybody go to him? How does this work? Like, just understanding as a board, because we have a lot of board members who have younger kids who've not gone through RHS. So I think just as a board and community, we can understand how this works, because as we go through this budget process, it'll help us get an understanding of the drivers of this budget. And I said that all without coughing, so I'm really happy today.
Well done.
Can I just take 1 second? I just want to underscore that, Terry came in very early on and recognized the need in our junior class in terms of the college planning process, particularly in light of where we've been the last couple of years. And I just really can't underscore how quickly he came in and, number one, moved that junior planning meeting to earlier in the year. So parents got a preemptive look before the holidays as to the process for themselves. That leads directly into third quarter, which is our juniors going into their meetings with their counselors on the learning how to use Naviance in the college process. And now he's additionally from scratch building a college fair at school in April. So they'll go out of third quarter directly into a college fair in our own building. Heading into summer, I feel like our juniors are going to be better prepared than I can remember in past years in terms of a cohesive package we're handing students and parents. And I just would like to personally thank him in front of everybody for coming in, bringing his expertise and really wrapping that around for us. So thank you, Terry, for that.
Great.
Thank you. So the mental health component I see as one of those areas where the human condition looks at a situation, and we oftentimes strive for one cause, that there's one thing that leads to it. And for me, within a high school, mental health is part of an entire process, an entire package. It's holistic. And so working with students in a classroom setting gives us the model of, we work with the large group, and then the students, as the year goes on, they begin to present themselves more and more with individual needs. And there are various ways in which mental health presents itself. So first and foremost, taking a proactive approach. So that parent presentation back in November was, to a large degree, students are not just going through adolescence, parents are also going through adolescence with their adolescents, and we're going through this in the midst of a pandemic. And one of the normalcies, so to speak, is actually going to school day in and day out. So believe it or not, them coming in day after day after day is one of the most positive things that we can do. Being there as a support staff is crucial as well. But specifically to your point, if a student does present themselves with a situation, more often than not, it will end up with the school counselor. One of the things that I find really impressive is the teaching staff at Ridgefield High School is very, very quick with reaching out to counselors saying, hey, I'm noticing this, I'm observing this, etc. And that sort of goes back to my point about the holistic approach. And from there, like I said earlier, counselors are not, therapists. We do have some training in mental health interventions, but the mental health professionals are the school psychologists and licensed clinical social workers. So that would be sort of that, that approach. And obviously being proactive is probably the best way overall for us to approach it. So there's some other things on the horizon that I'd like to do.
Thank you. Selena, you have a question?
Thank you so much for your presentation. I have a question. You mentioned college-bound students, but do you have any initiatives for non-college-bound students? So when they graduate, do you have plans? Do you have anything that you put together to kind of lead them depending on, what they want and that sort of thing?
Sure. Ridgefield High School has about 95% of its students who apply to and attend matriculate four-year colleges. So the students who choose that non-traditional route actually number in just under 5%. So with that in mind, when I say rep visits, it's not just representatives from colleges. We also have representatives from trade schools. We also have representatives from the RV, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. With that college fair, that's one of the things that I also want to include are representatives from those contingencies. In the same vein, I mentioned this program called Naviance. One of the things that we use with Naviance, especially with the 10th graders, is we try to do an assessment in terms of career interests. Now, find me a 15-year-old that knows exactly what it is that they want to do as they become an adult. But the reality is we educate them about potential career paths. So believe it or not, the introduction to the college search process begins with where do you see yourself? What is it that you want to do to generate income? How do you want to spend your time in your adult life? And from there, then we frame, well, this is what you need to do in order to access this. So
you have a list of trade schools and that sort of thing, or technical schools for the, not all software developers need to go to college. I mean, I'm very pro college. All my children are in college, but I also see, I ran an IT consulting firm, and sometimes I thought, wow, I'm not sure you needed that 4-year degree to make that 6-figure salary. So not to frown on colleges, but the price of college is really, it's getting really high. So do you have a list of those sort of trade schools and those sort of things? Do we have that?
Yeah, those are in our program called Naviance.
Okay, so it is, you're still using Naviance. My kids all use that, so I'm familiar with that. So thank you for that, because I just, as the prices get, higher and higher and higher, I would like to see maybe, maybe that happen a little bit more for kids so that they have more choices,
Sure.
So thank you. I really appreciate all your hard work. It sounds like you're doing a fantastic job. So thank you. And thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have any other questions or comments from board members? Thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you very much for the work you're doing.
Jonathan, I had my hand up. I must be on your page too.
Yeah, but you're a little icon that looks like a little robot you.
Oh, my video went off. So, yep, I have just an observation more than a question. Having gone through this process with one kid during pandemic, one kid during pre-pandemic, it was chaotic at best. And I thank you for bringing a little bit of structure and order to that process. I think it'll go a long way. That's really it.
Thanks, Sean. All right. Thank you very much for that. Looks like a lot of steps in the right direction. Appreciate it. Look forward to hearing more.
Thank you.
And next up, we have item C, RPS writing instruction presentation.
Great.
Who will be leading that?
Good evening, everybody. So we are going to present to you tonight about writing in Ridgefield Public Schools. But before Jonathan puts up, before John Mansfield puts up our presentation, can I have the team introduce themselves? I think we're all here now. Here we go.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Linda Johnson, Director of Elementary Education.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Annie Tucci, 612 Humanities Coordinator.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sandy Klaus, Elementary at Ridgeberry. I'm the literacy coach.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jackie Doty. I'm the literacy coach at Farmingville Elementary.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Bray, the grade 6 teacher and department leader at Scotts Ridge Middle School.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Catherine Shear, English department leader and 8th grade teacher at East Ridge Middle School.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patty Boudelier. I'm the department chair of English at the high school.
Great. John Mansfield, can we have our presentation, please? Next slide, please. So this presentation tonight directly connects to our teaching and learning priorities for the 21-22 school years. And these priorities are around alignment and collaboration across grade levels. Previously, you've seen presentations from the World Language Department and the Music Department, and those presentations show the impact of all of the collaboration across the department. Tonight is a little bit different. You're going to see the impact of collaboration across one of the essential skills that all students need, and that is the skill of writing in grades K through 12. So the presentation will start with an overview of the writing instruction that's currently in place and a study of student work across several different grade levels. The second half of the presentation will introduce the 3-year study that we currently have begun, as well as ideas for innovations and growth moving forward. Next slide, please. And Linda Johnson is going to take over from here.
Great. Thanks, Corey. Once again, good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. The first part of our presentation focuses on what writing instruction looks like in Ridgefield Public Schools, which follows our curriculum that is aligned to the Common Core state writing standards. These standards provide a shared and consistent vision of what students should know and be able to do at each grade level. We are here this evening to show you how we grow our writers over time across grade levels because of this common understanding of the standards. First, we're going to talk about the 3 main types of writing: informational, opinion or argumentative, and narrative. Then we are going to describe how students engage in the process of writing to learn about structure, development, and language conventions. We will also highlight curricular practices to give you a sense of what our scope and sequence, assessments, and daily instruction looks like. It's important to keep in mind that our instructional and assessment practices focus on the process of writing. Process writing is an approach to teaching writing that allows the teacher and students to go through the process of producing a text, whether it's an informational, opinion, or a narrative piece. It also provides opportunity for learning and learners to progress in the area of structure, development, and language conventions. Students have opportunities to think about what to write. They produce drafts, they revise, edit, and they receive feedback from their teachers. And not only their teachers, they also receive feedback from their peers before publishing their final pieces. This approach to writing brings and fosters creativity, collaboration, and choice. Later in the presentation, you will see writing samples from our students across various grade levels that will highlight this process. Next slide, please, John. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 3 main types or the 3 main categories of writing that you see here: opinion, argumentative, informational, and narrative. And there are a few examples of each type of writing listed below. So in terms of opinion or argumentative writing, students are typically asked to take a position or an issue on a topic and explain and support their position with research from reliable and credible sources. Students learn how to make a claim and provide evidence to support their position. A specific example from our 5th grade curriculum is when writers take a position on whether or not chocolate milk should be a part of our schools. Students also learn how to write informative or informational pieces. And the main purpose here for this type of writing is to educate the reader on a certain topic. It doesn't aim to necessarily change the reader's thinking or move the reader to take an action. It is to inform the reader, to inform the audience. In our kindergarten curriculum, writers choose a topic of their choice and they learn how to write how-to books to teach one another about a topic. One of my old-time favorites is when our kindergartners write how-to books about how to write a book and then share that with their friends in class. And the third type of writing that you see here is narrative writing, which is essentially story writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. So an example from our 7th grade curriculum is when students engage in writing short fiction. They lift the sophistication of their writing by bringing attention to individual scenes, symbols, or writing techniques. Next slide, please. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the focus for instruction and assessment in all types of writing, which include these 3 main categories: structure, development, and language conventions. At the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that the writing standards are the foundation for our instruction and assessment. These 3 elements of writing are born from the standards, and we follow them, and they become developmentally more complex as we progress through the grade levels. Again, you'll see that growth over time when we share student samples later on in the presentation. So structure refers to the overall organization of writing, for instance, including a lead, transitions, and conclusions. Development focuses on elaboration and craft. Depending on the different type of writing that a student may be engaging in, it might include developing realistic characters, specific details, reasons, or important facts. And lastly, language conventions refer to the grammar, usage, capitalization, spelling, and punctuation that's outlined in our curriculum and in our assessments, again, with complexity over the various grade levels as students move on from one grade to another. So next, you're going to hear a little bit from our literacy coaches and our department leads about what instruction and assessment looks like in the different grade levels. Sandy will start us off at the elementary level. Next slide, John.
Okay, thanks, Linda. Good evening, everybody. In grades K through 5, our scope and sequence is aligned with the Common Core state standards and is intentionally designed so that students can experience each of the 3 genres 2 to 3 times per year. And then within each unit, students cycle through the writing process that Linda previously described several times, giving students the ability to internalize and then transfer this process to all of their future writing. All of this repeated practice leads to increased confidence, independence, and growth. And then in all of the grades, we use a variety of assessment tools, including rubrics, checklists, and progressions that increase in challenge and complexity across each grade level. Rubrics and checklists are used to advance structure, development, and language conventions when writing. And the writing process progression is used to improve a writer's ability to generate ideas, plan, draft, revise, and edit. Teachers utilize all of these tools to provide feedback to students, and students also use these tools to self-assess their writing, to set their own goals, and then monitor their progress towards those goals. And then writers also lean on these tools when working with one another, with their writing partners, to provide each other with meaningful feedback. Each day, the whole class receives instruction during the mini lesson through an explicit teaching point. And then during this lesson, students have an opportunity to actively engage in or practice the day's strategy. After the lesson, students independently practice all of the strategies that they've learned in their own writing. And then as students work, teachers meet with small groups of students and conduct one-to-one writing conferences to target the specific needs of each student. These small groups and conferences are informed from a variety of data sources. So next, Jennifer Bray will discuss the instructional and assessment practices in grades 6 through 8. Thank you.
Next slide, John. Hi, good evening again. My name is Jennifer Bray, and I'm the English department leader and 6th grade teacher at Scotchridge Middle School. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to discuss writing in grades 6 through 8. We engage in several writing units of various types of writing throughout the year that are aligned to the state standards. There are shared writing experiences at each grade level. What this means is that all of our students in each grade level engage in types of writing that Linda shared earlier. For example, the students do narrative writing, research writing, and opinion and argument pieces. Right now, our 6th graders are about to begin an information research writing unit, and I know that they've engaged in this style of writing in 5th grade, and they will again as they move up in grade level. The unit is designed to build upon skills and strategies they have already learned. We use a variety of ways to assess writing with longer and shorter pieces. There are checklists and rubric for each type of writing that we use to assess and monitor progress throughout the year, as well as to provide feedback to our students. Students also use these same tools to monitor, self-assess, and reflect on their own progress and growth as writers. One specific way that we calibrate as a team to support all of our students and support their individual progress as writers is through benchmarks. We use benchmark assessments similar to what Sandy just shared about pre and post assessments at the elementary level, which are on-demand writing pieces in the fall and spring. We give the same prompt in all 3 grade levels in order to collaboratively look at growth and development over time, both vertically as well as horizontally across our grade levels. Similar to K through 5, our instructional practices focus on writing as a process and the workshop model, which includes whole class as well as targeted small group instruction. As part of the writing process, students also participate in both peer and teacher conferences during the year. You will hear things that sound similar during this presentation related to writing, which is important for our students because at each grade level, we support their development as they grow into confident, strong, and independent writers. Next, you'll hear from Patty. She's going to share about writing instruction at the high school level.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you for this opportunity to highlight the quality instruction that we provide to all our students at the high school, regardless of level or course. And as you've heard before from K-8, we do align our instruction to the Common Core state standards. In addition, we provide vertical and horizontal alignment by articulating our program through digital writing folders that assure grade level teaching and learning expectations. In terms of assessment, students write in a variety of genres, for example, from memoir to seniors writing the college essay to research writing. And they also write for a variety of purposes in order to increase their complexity and stamina over time and to become college-ready writers. For example, at each grade level, students will write all of the following. They'll write a research paper, they'll write a narrative, they'll write a close reading essay on literature, and they'll also write self-reflections. In fact, many of our midterm exams ask students to reflect on their writing goals so far from the first semester to carry forward into the second semester. In addition, of course, to other grade level assessments that they have, grade level specific assessments. Like in the middle school, the high school also practices benchmarking with our in-class essays that happen quarterly. So teachers meet at grade level teams and with course specific teams. So whether it's college prep teachers meeting together and honors level teachers together, AP teams, etc. And they meet to calibrate and score those in-class writing samples using a common grade level rubric. In addition, we've devised individual rubrics for each of the 3 types of writing that Linda has explained, whether they be argumentative, expository, or narrative. In terms of our instructional practices, as with K-8, we focus on writing as a process with all our students. So we focus on brainstorming, outlining, drafting, and also peer editing. In class, we use a workshop model that includes independent practice, small and whole group discussions, as well as peer editing, again, all in an effort to improve drafts toward the final product completion. Yet I think one of the hallmarks of our program, and arguably my favorite, and I've been doing this for 20 years now, is our writing control program. We meet with each student independently, one-to-one, 2 times a year, so each semester. And in that period, it's usually their free period or before or after school. And luckily with the advent of Google Meets, it's been remarkably important to kind of see them at any time or place. The pandemic did nothing to deter us from our instruction with one-to-one writing instruction. So in that sense, we meet with them and individualize and personalize their learning. In fact, as of tonight, I ran the data. We've met with students 2,001 times so far this year. So that's how many conferences we've delivered so far in the school year. And now I'd like to turn our presentation back to Linda. She's going to introduce the next phase of the presentation where we'll focus on student work samples. Next slide.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So far, we shared with you the main types of writing and the importance of teaching structure, development, and language conventions across all grade levels, across all different genres. We also talked about what instruction looks like in terms of our scope and sequence, a little bit about assessments and our instructional practices. So next, you're going to see an opinion or argumentative writing sample from 4th, 8th, and 11th grades. These pieces are a result of the writing process that you've heard about this evening. Once again, our literacy coaches and department leaders will showcase how structure, development, and conventions become more complex as our writers grow. Jackie's going to start us off with an example from our fourth grade curriculum. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Linda. Good evening. In kindergarten through fifth grade, students write opinion pieces in a variety of structures with multiple opportunities to go through the writing process. We built a foundation that writers have a voice to make change. They identify an audience and work to convince that audience. This here is an example of a fourth grade student's persuasive essay. The essayist is working on their structure in many ways. You'll notice that she starts with an introduction that hooks the reader right away, puts you in a calm little forest right before the wildfire starts. She then states her claim and reasons. Wildfires are a problem because we need oxygen. Animals are losing their homes and forests are getting wasted. Throughout the essay, she is using a variety of transitions and paragraphs. Finally, her conclusion suggests an action to care about this issue as much as she does. Throughout the essay, the essayist is developing her opinion. She's using specific examples that support each reason. She's incorporating figurative language throughout the piece, deliberate word choice, and a convincing tone. Finally, for conventions, the essayist is using the opportunity to incorporate longer, complex sentences with commas. Next, you'll hear from Catherine about essay writing in the middle school. Next slide.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jackie. Again, my name is Catherine Shear. I'm English department leader at Eastridge and 8th grade English teacher as well. I'm happy to be here tonight, and I'll be discussing the structure and development of a middle school argument essay. In grades 6 through 8, we really strive to move writers to an evidence-based argument with strong and sophisticated writers' voices. Typically, this starts by following a traditional 5-paragraph format: an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Once that's mastered, we then encourage students to flex their writing muscles a little bit more by breaking away from that traditional structure and trying to write longer essays using more body paragraphs and experimenting with writing techniques that build more craft and style into their pieces. Students work to take their writing to the next level by doing a variety of things. They develop sophisticated evidence-based claims. They create body paragraphs and use multiple pieces of relevant evidence within those body paragraphs. They elaborate and then they analyze that evidence, and they all work to connect that back to their claim. They use more complex language. They start to use stronger sentence structures, and they weave transitions both within paragraphs and then also between paragraphs to help guide their readers through different parts of the essay. Students at this point are composing 3 to 4 page pieces, and they're really trying to push the envelope and work to convey larger ideas, especially working that within their conclusions. So here on this slide, we see an example of a conclusion from an 8th grade literary essay analyzing how a theme about perseverance is developed by the author. The claim states, through various author's craft techniques developed over the course of the short story, How to Transform an Everyday Ordinary Hoop Court, author Matt de la Peña teaches readers that perseverance is the key to success within life. Highlights of this conclusion are the first few lines. The writer starts by saying, Matt de la Peña uses numerous author's craft techniques to develop a theme of perseverance through the story. He uses figurative language, like imagery, and a unique point of view to display how the protagonist has a complex relationship with his father. Later on in the conclusion, the writer adds, parallel structure, a unique type of author's craft, was also brought into play to get the theme across to readers. It showed the protagonist grow mentally and that he learned something from his obstacles, seeing that his father was not absent after all. Through the various author's craft techniques, de la Peña taught readers that with human nature, perseverance is a must to survive and strive. And that's how they wrapped it up. In this conclusion, we see how the students' writing development, it increases by their use of varying sentence structures that help transition from one idea to the next. The writer also pushes their thinking past simply just restating their claim. And we see this when the writer points out how the author's craft techniques help to drive the theme home. And then they connect to larger universal ideas about human nature and why it's important to persevere in our relationships. So we think this is a great conclusion and a good example of how 8th graders are learning to express their ideas about literature and the world around them in very significant and meaningful ways. And part of the writing process is also conferring and providing that feedback to help grow our readers based on their individual needs. And by the end of middle school, we see a more well-rounded and a very sophisticated writer. Ideally, at this point, then we send them off to high school and Patty picks them up. And so she's going to take you on to the next slide and show you the final stages of what it looks like in writing across the grades here at RPS.
Thank you, Catherine. Next slide, please. So at grade 11, all the students partake in a study of the American experience. So every junior would write an argumentative piece about some aspect of our American identity. And in this particular piece, it comes from one of our 6 sections of AP Language and Composition. And the student is writing actually as a part of the National Profiles and Courage contest. And she's arguing that this particular politician, Sam Rayburn, deserves to be considered as a profile in courage. In fact, right now, our 6 sections of students are actively revising their work based on a writing conference that we've had, and they're going to be uploading their essays to the contest on Friday evening. But this paper in particular comes from last year because our students are still in the midst of revision. So I wanted to show you a final product. And this student actually placed in the top 10% nationally last year in the contest. This paper, as Catherine discussed, you'll see how the writing continues to grow in sophistication, and we'll see more college-ready types of writing. So for example, the claim is highlighted despite his enthusiasm and resolute work on the New Deal program in the shadow of the President Roosevelt, Sam Rayburn is often forgotten as the protector of the people. So she's adding a little bit of alliteration at the end. She's having citations of sources. You'll see, in fact, across the 2 paragraphs, she's integrating, I think, about 6 or 7 sources overall. And on the right side of the page, you'll see the works cited list. It's not even a complete list. Although this paper is actually only 3 to 4 pages, like you'd see in middle school, it actually is more complex in terms of paragraphing. So this is no longer a 5-paragraph essay. You'll see, again, this sophistication with integration of evidence, as well as more sophisticated transitions. And ultimately, over time, you'll see, again, the language increase in terms of their sophisticated diction, as well as stronger control of language in general in terms of syntax and structure. So this student, again, is hoping by the end of the paper to have cited at the minimum of 5 sources, yet you'll see from the works cited list, she's actually, I think at the end, she cited about 13 to 14 sources. So again, a bit more sophisticated in terms of the usage of information and how well they're able to build a conversation around their topic. And now I will return things over to Dr. Tucci, who will discuss the next part of our presentation.
Thank you, everybody. So for the final part of our presentation is about why we are studying writing and how we engage in that work. So writing is one of the main ways in which we express ourselves. And it is a skill that is comprehensively taught in grades K through 12 at RPS. When we think of one of the most important skills that we develop in our students, this is one of the major ones. As a result, we have decided to study instruction, assessment, and alignment of our writing practices at RPS. We have a commitment to our students and value our exceptional opportunities here to grow our writers. Our goal is to align our instruction, deepen our practice, and innovate. We are planning a 3-year study, and this is our first year. So just as important as to why we study is how we study. Program evaluation follows a cyclical process in which we engage in observation and analysis. And from there, you set goals and measurable action steps, and then you put those steps into place, and we reflect and evaluate them. And then you kind of start the whole process all over again. As we engage in this process, we will be able to identify areas of success and areas of need. Next slide, please. So what you see here are samples of some information related to the phases and the processes that will act as to guide our work. So for example, in year 1, you will see the first phase of the cyclical process mentioned earlier, and this is the observational and analysis phase. For example, we witnessed teaching and learning. We set up teams of educators to look at writing over time. We study student work samples, and we set goals based on those findings. A recent example that took place last month when a team of teachers and administrators from our middle schools and high schools, we visited a writing lesson in a 5th grade classroom. This experience and those like it are incredibly meaningful for all the folks involved, and it gives us the opportunity to create informed and strategic goals for our future work. We look forward to having this same team visit our middle school and high school classrooms by the end of the school year. From there, in year 2, we will begin with the strategic goals and measurable action steps from the observational and quantitative findings from this year. For example, conferring with students is essential to the process, to the writing process and their development as a writer. So we will engage with professional development to support writing conferences this year, starting with the high school and middle school. Year 3 mainly consists of that reflection and evaluation and that time to process, make adaptations, changes. We engage in curricular revisions, measure the outcomes of our action plans that were set for programmatic needs, and begin that cyclical nature of a study over. As mentioned previously, the study of teaching and learning is that cyclical process. So it doesn't always follow 3 years, right? Because you can do that process to meet the needs if they arise. So this allows us to be responsive to the needs and balance that with the ability to plan forward. That really forward-thinking process is important to us. While we are only at the beginning of this study, some initial goals that are unfolding as we work on our alignment is that we're looking ahead to how all teachers are teachers of writing. This innovative work develops our work further because we want the alignment of skills, concepts, vocabulary across all content areas. We want to be able to maximize these learning experiences to be transferable and that all students and teachers will speak that same language of writing. So our goal is to grow high quality, lifelong writers and maximize what our students experience through grade 12, culminating with those one-on-one individual writing conferences in their high school experience. This work is foundational to the innovation and forward thinking of our entire team to give our students the best and most authentic learning experiences possible. As a result, we can meaningfully develop curriculum, support our teachers over time by targeting and prioritizing those needs, informing future budgets, planning professional development, and celebrating the successes of teaching and learning at RPS. So I'm going to pass it back to Corey.
Okay. Well, team, thank you so much. So you just heard a presentation all about what's currently happening in writing in grades K through 12, and then the beginning of a multi-year study that we've just embarked on and what some of our hopes and dreams are for the outcome of that work. A special thank you to this group and all these leaders who have put a lot of time and work into pulling this all together, who are leading the study along with Dr. Tucci and Linda Johnson, and who have stayed up late tonight to present this to all of you. So we're happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, team. That was a great presentation. Looking to the board members for questions or comments. Sean, I see you this time.
Yep, just a comment. You know, the math presentation a couple of meetings ago, the counseling one, this one, I feel like we were kind of in stasis on a lot of this stuff for a number of years. And it's just amazing to see things progress and move forward very quickly. And I like that this one's iterational, that we can kind of calibrate it in flight.
You're here.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the board members? No, there'd probably be more questions if it was earlier. in
Jonathan,
the
I
evening.
think Tom has his hand up.
Oh, I see him now. Tom.
Yes, thank you. I just have a comment. I really want to thank Dr. De Silva and her team and staff who spoke tonight and all those behind the scenes who probably helped contribute to these presentations. It's clear that in Ridgefield, we're fortunate to have some very talented, compassionate, and committed professionals who are working in our school district. And I just want to bring that up because I would like to make sure the town in general and the board in particular keeps that in mind during the budget process. That these professionals are so well trained, obviously know what they're talking about and know what we need. And just listening to all the presentations tonight and over the past few meetings, it's so clear how fortunate we are to have such a talented group of school professionals. So I'm looking forward to working with you all in this budget season. And I just ask that we as board members keep that in mind in looking at the very small budget increases in the past few years. It almost seems like, I don't know how you could even stay ahead with just those small percentage increases. It almost seems like you were treading water. So
Lost the last few words, but I think your sentiment got across quite well. Do we have any other questions or comments? Echoing what both Tom and Sean said, thank you all for that. It was a very clear presentation and shows the great work that's being done. And it's really why most of us are sitting on the board, is to hear your presentations like that. And I thank you all for that.
Thank you, team.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Thank you.
Next up, we are at the correspondence to the board, starting with public comment. Rachel, what do we have?
Yes, so good evening. So just as a kind reminder, you will have 3 minutes for public comment this evening. Please state your full name and address before going forward. So first public comment, Kelly.
She's not taking the promotion in.
Okay.
You can come back to her. You want to try the next name?
That is the only list on our attendees for this evening. I could do the correspondence report and then we can quickly check before we sign
Sure.
off. Okay. So our correspondence report, we have received 15 emails since our last Board of Education meeting. 5 emails inquired about in-person meetings and or public comment. 1 email inquired about House Bill 6619. 2 emails regarding remote learning. 1 email regarding mask wearing. 2 emails regarding COVID rules in school. 1 email regarding healthy start times. 2 emails regarding TikTok. And 1 email expressed thanks to the administration. So, John, maybe we can try one more time then?
She did hit the decline button. I got the notification. I can try one
Okay.
time though.
Okay.
No, she declined again. I think she may just be watching.
Okay. All right, that does conclude this evening. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Rachel? I have a second? Sean? All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hands. Non-unanimous. Thank you all very much. Have a good night.
Thank
And we'll
you.
see you in